Special Education Co-op Director and the Mississinewa Director. And she has a program that she's excited about. I'll let her tell you how long it's been in existence, but it has involved Mississinewa this year for the first time, and we're hoping that there'll be increased participation among Mississinewa students in the future. So, Mrs. Graham.
Okay. Good evening, board. Thanks for having me. There are three things that I'd like to talk with you about this morning, or no, I guess it's not this morning, it's the evening. The theme of all of it is March is Disability Awareness Month, and that is not to focus on disability, but more abilities, and the idea of inclusive learning, that all students have an opportunity, kind of like Susan said, that all students have an equal or accessible opportunity to learn in their home community. So this is March's theme. And we will be celebrating that in each of the buildings. Each principal and administrative team will be given supplies and posters to identify that. But the three things today that we want to talk about are Champions Together is the first one. Champions Together started about 3 years ago in Grant County. And one of the things that we look forward to every year, and it's been going on for about 30 years, is a unified basketball tournament that we play with. Typically it's all 5 schools. This year it's only 4. Eastbrook doesn't have a team this year. They don't have enough students, but we get together in February and March after the traditional basketball season's over and when the gym is free. And we have a unified team off of each school that plays together, and we just play a basketball game, and they get to have a home game. They get to have a senior night in their own gym. And it's pretty exciting. Last year, I think maybe you would remember this game, happened at halftime of the Mississinewa-Marion game. And were any of you there at that game? How exciting it is for the students to participate in that. Unfortunately, with different things that happened this year between administrative teams, we weren't able to do that at halftime, but we hope to bring that back again. We will be participating, though, and I put the date for you. On March 1st, it will be a home game here at Mississinewa, and I don't remember which team they're playing, but all 4 teams will be playing that night. There will be a concession stand. We're hoping for a huge home crowd so that, that our kids here at Mississinewa and all of the kids have the opportunity to have a good crowd. So that's Champions Together. Unified Champions is a preschool through 8th grade program, and particularly it is going to be, it's involving these 3 areas where we look at being an inclusive school, where we're teaching tolerance, where we're teaching leadership among students. And this sport is a track meet, and it's going to be held for all of Grant County here at Mississinewa High School, because Chance is a rock star, and he agreed to take that on, said that we could host it. So all 5 schools will be bringing preschool through 8th graders here sometime in May. We haven't solidified that date yet. But again, it's students with and without disabilities that are going to be competing against each other. So that's pretty exciting stuff too. We are looking for community partners. We've created a letter. And I tell you that only because as the LEA for the co-op, you may be accepting or voting to accept donations, I hope, in the near future. And then the last program is called GWA, and it's a post-secondary opportunity for 18 to 22-year-olds with intellectual disabilities. This year, we have 2 students from Mississinewa that are attending this program. So that's way too small, and I couldn't tell if it was or not. But in a nutshell, this, in 1998, way back when I was working on my master's, I was introduced to the idea that students could have an experience with college, and that people with intellectual disabilities literally go to a high school and they stay there for 8 years. And they're working on the same kinds of things, but when their peers are graduating, they're still at high school. We have a rock star amongst you that was a peer tutor in my class way back then, and about 19 whatever. I won't say who that person would be, but she was awesome in identifying the right for students to have, similar experiences, going to prom, getting to go to ball games, going to the movies, hanging out with your friends. And so in 2012, when I became the director at Marion Community Schools, I was able to make decisions that allowed for a collaboration between my job and Indiana Wesleyan University, and they embraced it, and they have ever since. I've got some pictures of that first group. Those first 5 students, or 6, I guess, I can't see, 5, got on a bus and they went over there, and they spent the next 2 years there, graduated, had better opportunities with their peers, with job exploration, and all 5 of them graduated and had a job when they left, which if you look at statistics, it's about 18% of students with disabilities leave school with employment. So to think that our first 5 had jobs when they left was pretty exciting. Mm-hmm. This gentleman in the middle with the beard is Dr. Ellsbury. I'm not sure he was on board with me in 2013 when we walked into his door the first time, but I will tell you he embraces this program and has students in his class, which is a beginning to education for teachers, and loves to have the kids in his class. This young man learned to drive that Gator because he worked out in landscaping and went in the summertime and worked at 6 o'clock in the morning and learned how to do those kinds of things that he would have never had an opportunity to do before. This is just showing pride with the Indiana Wesleyan shirts. I can't say names, but this is one of the students that graduated from this school district last year and is thriving on the campus of Indiana Wesleyan University right now. That is her job in the bookstore. So we had 2 from Mississinewa, 2 from Madison Grant. We expect to have more this year. I believe at least 1 more from Mississinewa and a couple from Oak Hill. It's a 2-year program. So after they walk through graduation here, they spend the next 2 years on the campus of a college. So we try to build relationships with directors and with other professors and try to, get them opportunities like that.
Good.
Thank you for your time. Questions, anybody?
Anybody have any questions for Lisa?
Okay.
I have one.
All
Go
right.
ahead.
Any chance that this program or its the principles or concepts of this program spreading to either Ivy Tech or Taylor University?
That's a great question. We chose Indiana Wesleyan University just because of its central location. I'm not sure about Ivy Tech, only because you go there, you take a class, and you leave. You don't spend a lot of time there socializing. Yeah. Yes, Taylor University would be very interested. The key concern or component that would cause us the biggest problem would be transportation. I do know we have small buses and vans and those kinds of things. So I know Dr. Mahon from Taylor University would be very interested in having a collaboration like that. It would cost money for another teacher. There is a full-time teacher on the campus of Indiana Wesleyan University and an assistant. So that would be another staff member, but yes, I think they would be interested.
Do they live in the dorms?
They do not. It is not a residential program at this time. We started out asking for that before my timeline of 2012, and it kind of got shut down very quickly. So we waited a few years, redesigned it for a day program, basically. So it is a dual enrolled program. The students are we're still receiving Part B dollars for them. They're still considered a high school student, but their education occurs on the college campus.
Do we pay, or do they pay, like, regular?
They allow us to audit classes for free. They give them an ID just like every Indiana Wesleyan University student has. They can go to the movies, they can go in the gym, they have free admittance to all the athletic events. It really is quite a great collaboration.
So this is an alternative to being in our classrooms, right? Is that what you're saying? To age 22, it's what, 18 to 22,
Right.
an adult, right?
Right.
So then they, instead of keeping them here at school.
For
but this
a
is,
long period of time.
But the ability is a concern, right? Their abilities as far as.
They are intellectually disabled, yes.
Right, but is there a line that they gotta be above before they can do this, or?
This is a certification program, so only if you graduate with a certificate, not a diploma.
Okay.
So it's that opportunity for those kids that don't necessarily have other post-secondary opportunities, like going to college to earn a degree. Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Lisa.
Mrs. Graham.
Okay,
I never carry my cell phone.
I hope it's not my daughter calling you. She called last meeting.
item 53, acceptance of the Apple lease. Mr. McKenzie.
Yes, I will refer that to Mrs. Townsend.
Yes, last meeting, we presented you with 4 bids on the one-to-one at the elementary, and at that time, the lowest bid was the Apple Finance. So tonight, we're getting all of our paperwork in ducks in a row, and so tonight, I would like you to formally accept the lease payment obligation and the incumbency certificate, and Mr. Banks would then sign it, so I need that formally done tonight, please.
Okay, very good. What's the board's pleasure?
Mr. President,
Mr. Cunningham?
I make a motion to approve the acceptance of the Apple lease as previously presented last meeting.
Motion by Mr. Cunningham. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Freitas. Any comments or discussion regarding the device lease from Apple? All right, not seeing any. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, item 54, permission to void the 2-year-old outstanding checks. Ms. Townsend.
Yes, I ask you to do this annually each year when we have checks that have been uncashed and are still outstanding on the books for 2 years. This year, we do have 2 of those checks totaling $242.23, so I would ask for your permission tonight to receive those checks back into the general fund.
Thank you. What's the board's pleasure?
Mr. President,
Mr. Smith?
I move that we grant permission to void the 2-year-old outstanding checks.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Gaskin. Any comments or discussion?
So these are checks we have written that have never been cashed?
That's correct.
Okay.
I do have one question too, naturally. I mean, most checks are voided after 6 months. Have we reached out to those folks to see why and?
I actually, when they were on the books last year at the 1-year point, I started reaching out to these folks, trying to let them know that they did have these outstanding checks. They had a whole year to
Still haven't responded?
try to get it redone or a new one issued, and
Okay.
I haven't heard from them.
Yep.
So.
All right, very good. Thank you. Have a motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Gaskin. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 55, personnel. Mr. McKenzie.
Yes, we have the following personnel items for the board's consideration this evening. Alexis Yakel has resigned as a paraprofessional at Westview Elementary effective March 2nd. Dara Young to be hired as a school data counselor effective immediately. She will actually start on that job on March 5th. Chris Butchie to be hired as the assistant track coach at Mississinewa High School effective immediately. Dustin Jones to be hired as a volunteer track coach at Mississinewa High School effective immediately. Matt Melhoff to be hired as a second shift custodian effective February 20th. Mike Simpkins to be hired as a bus driver effective January 22nd, and we would recommend approval of these personnel items as presented.
Thank you, Mr.
President.
McKenzie. Mr. Gaskin.
I make a motion to accept the superintendent's recommendations on personnel as presented.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Gaskin and a second by Mrs. Miller. Any comments or discussion regarding personnel? All right, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 56, conference request. Mr. McKenzie.
Yes, Mr. President, we have the following conference requests for the board's consideration this evening. Brandon Schuler to attend the International Federation for the Teaching of English as a presenter in Birmingham, England, June 21st through the 24th at a cost of $695 to be paid for from the RJ Basket travel account. Bob and Lori Elson to attend the 2018 United States Marine Corps Educators Workshop in San Diego, California on March 5th through the 9th with no cost to the corporation. We would recommend approval of these conference requests.
Thank you, Mr. McKenzie. What's the board's pleasure?
Mr. President,
Mr. Smith.
move to approve the conference requests as presented.
Motion by Mr. Smith. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Freitas. Any comments or discussion regarding the conference request? All right, all All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 57, facilities report. Mr. McKenzie.
At this time, I talked to Mr. Gosser this morning, and at this time, we do not have anything in particular. The next board meeting, we intend to have a work session on summer maintenance projects. And so we'll get board discussion and input at that point. So do the principals have anything under this item? Okay. Does the board have
Board
anything?
have any
under
questions?
this item?
Okay, we will move on. Item 58, legislative update. Mr. Cunningham.
Yes, Mr. President. Busy activity at the legislature right now. They've got, with this short session, the deadline's March 14th, so a lot of things are moving really quickly. Got a few bills to go through and then answer any questions you might have. First bill, Senate 65, instruction on human sexuality. It's the House Education Committee. I guess this was close to 3 hours of testimony, on this, but it's setting a curriculum on human sexuality and that being set in curriculum by the state. So, it'll have another hearing on Tuesday, February 20th. And again, you can watch those online if you'd like to. Next bill, House Bill 1315, school financial management. This is authored by Representative Tim Brown. He's probably one of the three top most powerful legislators that are in office right now. So it was heard by Senate Appropriations Committee last week. But basically this bill contains provisions regarding the oversight and governance of Gary Community Schools and Muncie Community Schools. And the reason that it's, people might say, well, why is that important to Mississinewa Community Schools or other ones, is that it provides provisions regarding fiscal indicators. If the opportunity would exist for the legislature to look at the possibility of you maybe being financially distressed and take over the operations of a school corporation. So the ISBA has been really active in wanting to see a clear scope and consequences of the process so that, this doesn't, become so, if you're in trouble as a school corporation, then the state just comes and takes you over. So they're following this really closely. And I think the next hearing for that is also February 20th. Senate Bill 189, K through 12 funding. And this is the shortfall that happened in K through 12 funding, it passed Senate Appropriations Committee. Basically, it's to the money that was in the shortfall to be able to return. To be able to give to school corporations. So, and I think it's about $16 million this year, 20 to 60 million next year, and they're finalizing this, all of this, I think, as we speak. Tomorrow will be the House Education Committee meeting. That starts at 8:30. Those are usually televised, so if you want to watch those. Senate Bill 172, computer science and a curriculum for computer science, asking all schools to have that in place. Senate Bill 217, looking at schools and a policy, process, and procedure of addressing dyslexia. Senate Bill 354, freeway school corporations and schools. I have no idea what that one is. I have to look that one up. And then there are some other ones. Athletically, heat preparation, preparedness training for coaches, 1024. Really looking at, I think they had 8
Summertime.
8 deaths,
Heat
I think,
exhaustion.
last year from heat. And so they're looking at putting in a training, much like they did with concussion protocols. So, that's going to be something that will be addressed. There's some other ones that are on this list I could go into, but House Ways and Means met on the 13th, and our ISBA testified in support of 189, which was the K-12 funding, and it's Terry Spradlin, who is our ISBA person, and they attend all of those. I'll try and forward you all the emails. I get probably a few more that maybe that you don't, that are like updates. Generally, he'll send out something in general, but somebody must have told him what I do, and so I get a little bit more of these than what comes up. They also ask for testimony, and I don't know how we want to do that, whether we want to adopt something specifically. So if they ask us for someone to come and testify specifically on a specific bill, that was one that Terry sent. I don't know how we want to approach that. I don't know if we want to, but they're looking for someone from particular school boards. So anyway, we don't have to decide that today, and there's nothing that's really come up, but I've seen that mentioned before in other postings, so it's something we might want to address. And I think that's it for 2 weeks. Everything will probably be a lot more clear, because it'll have to have made its way back from whatever, if it goes from the Senate, then to the House, and then back to the Senate again to vote. So that should have to happen pretty quickly by our next meeting, which would be first week in March. So we should know what's on the table. So I probably will just be reporting to you then what's passed.
Sure.
If we get down to selecting a board member to lobby or represent us, you might want to consider anybody on the board that spends a lot of time in Indianapolis Monday through Friday.
And is currently the liaison.
Just a suggestion.
Well, I think in the Ball Stevens situation, they're talking about doing away with the school board, right? That's in that situation over there.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
A non-elected big position, they'll just take it over and run it as part of.
Well, and that's what their worry is you get financially distressed. And so now because of that, we're taking away, so legal representation of people that were voted on don't have the ability to be able to.
To really govern.
To really govern the corporation.
It's up to the financial managers and the school managers and administrators that they appoint and
Right.
put in place.
So they're, they want to know what ISBA wants to do representing school corporations is, when does that end? What's the scope of that? Is it for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, never ending? What's the process that they want to see that's in place so that it returns to local governance, both for Gary and for Muncie.
I think that one of them colleges has a school that's operating currently right now.
Right, right,
Okay.
yeah. So, again, that's the ISBA is looking at it and saying, okay, so are we gonna start getting into a thing where now we're gonna put universities in charge of, running local school corporations, so. And really, I don't think they're not necessarily in favor of what, the legislature is doing right now. They want to know, what's at the end of the tunnel, rather than just happen.
I don't have problems they're gonna use it as a lab to figure out what went wrong, how to make it better, so they can come back, but to take it over firmly, I think would be a bad situation.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
So we'll get more updates and stuff as they come along, but.
Any questions for Chris from the administration?
He does a great job, I think.
Anybody? I agree.
Thank you, Mr. Cadigan.
Anybody?
You're welcome.
Anybody down here have any questions for Chris? All right, not hearing any, we will move on. Item 58, donations and corporate sponsors.
Yes, Mr. President, we have the following donation for the board's consideration this evening, and that is to the high school trap shooting team from Jackson Dairy Farm in the amount of $100, and we would recommend approval of this item.
Thank you, Mr. McKenzie.
Mr. President,
Mr. Gaskin.
I make a motion to accept the superintendent recommendation on donation as presented.
Motion by Mr. Gaskin. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Freitas. Any comments or discussion regarding the donation? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Line item 60, claims against the corporation. Ms. Townsend.
Yes, presenting claims in the amount of $1,415,492.54. For your approval, please.
Thank you, Ms. Townsend. What's the board's pleasure?
Mr. President,
Mr. Cunningham.
make a motion to approve the claims as presented.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Cunningham and a second by Mr. Gaskin. Any comments or discussion regarding claims? Not seeing any. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 64, or actually 61, won't jump that far yet. Correspondence with other business. Mr. McKenzie.
Yes, I'll refer that to Mrs. Townsend. Oh, no, didn't, no, I'm sorry. I take that
I liked
back.
your face, Jill.
I did alarm you, I can tell. I'm sorry.
Holy smokes.
I do have two things.
Have a relay hand.
And then we'll, I have two things, and then we'll go to Mrs. Townsend. The next board meeting is March 5th, the regular scheduled meeting at 6:30 here in this room. And on February 10th, a week ago from this past Saturday, we had the elementary robotics team competition, elementary level, but it was held at the high school. So I'm going to let Mrs. Lockwood, the elementary principal at Northview, talk about that a little bit, but I do believe Mrs. Varner was there and Mr. Q was there. Was there any other administrators there? Mrs. Eckstein were there, so they may want to, and Mr. Resch was there. So it was a team effort.
They have a robot.
I don't know where Mr. Young was, but moving on. I'm sure there was a ball game. But go ahead, Mrs. Lockwood.
I think, first of all, thanks to Mr. Quatter and his staff for allowing us to have our second robotics competition. Last year, we did that at Northview. We had 30 elementaries attend, and our gym just was not big enough to kind of really house that in, I want to say, in an easy way. After all those teams, Steve and I looked at each other and we're like, oh, this needs to go to the high school. So we had it at the high school this year, and we were able to use the auxiliary gym to set up places for 30 teams to kind of land and work on their robots and get ready for competition, and then we held the competition in the high school gym. Thanks to Mr. Burbank and for teaching Mrs. Varner this year. This is Mr. Burbank's second year kind of running this and kind of getting this off the ground for us, both at the elementary school, and we moved it into the middle school and had a middle school team this year. So they did a great job. I know that Brody was looking for volunteers to go to Lucas Oil Stadium for the Worlds that they're having here in a couple of weeks. And we did fortunately have a team qualify at our competition. We had four teams in the competition, 3 from Northview and 1 from the middle school, and that was the only team we had participate in our first year doing the robotics tournament. So we gave away 5 awards, and our kids won 3 of them. We had a team that won for best robot design, which is just the overall design and able to explain the design of their robot. We had a team that won first place in the project manuals, where they created a manual that had something to do with kind of that engineering robotics, and they did some research and talked to some people in the field, and then they put together a PowerPoint and a poster, and then had to give an entire presentation that lasted 5 to 10 minutes on what they learned from this, and our team got first in that. And then we had a team that won the Excellence Award, and that was overall kind of best team that was there in the competition that day. I think 30 teams in one competition is one of the bigger ones that they have around the state. Some of the schools that came traveled 2+ hours to get there. So overall, throughout the entire day, out of the 4 teams that we had, 2 were in the top 10 the entire day. 1, the lowest they got, was ranked 14th out of the 30 that were there. The other one struggled a little bit, but they were also our youngest team. I think they all learned very, very much during this process. The team that won the Excellence Award is the one that has qualified to go on to the Worlds or state at Lucas Oil Stadium. That will be in March. Our team that ranked in the top 10 throughout the entire day missed going their opportunity at state just by a couple of points. We were able to find there is one more competition that's going to take place, and that's the last one, and it takes place on February 24th at Frankton. And they had one spot left, so we're gonna let that team try to qualify again for state, so keep your fingers crossed, we may get 2 teams that will qualify, that will be taking the state.